So I've been diving deep into Stanford's deep reinforcement learning course, and one concept in particular just totally grabbed me: policy gradients. It's one of those foundational ideas in AI, and I really wanted to walk through the insights from the lecture that made it all finally click.
It all starts with this really fascinating question. We're not talking about copying an expert here. The real challenge is, how do you get an agent, like a robot, to learn something as complex as walking completely from scratch, with nothing to go on but pure trial and error? So, the lecture laid out two big paths, right? On one side, you've got imitation learning. Think of that like following a recipe down to the very last letter. You'll get what the recipe makes, but nothing more. Reinforcement learning, though, that's totally different. It's like trying to become a master chef just by tasting what you cook. You don't have a manual, which means you could end up creating something completely new, something way better than the original recipe. And this is where we get to the first big aha moment for me from the lecture. The core idea behind our first algorithm is a simple rule. I mean, it's so simple, you almost can't believe it's powerful enough to teach a robot how to walk. And this is it, right here. The most basic policy gradient algorithm, it's actually called reinforce, really just boils down to this one simple, intuitive principle. It's taking that human idea of trial and error and turning it into a rule a computer can follow. So what does that actually look like in practice? Well, imagine the agent just tries a whole bunch of things, a series of actions we call trajectories. Then the algorithm looks back at all those attempts and asks, okay, which of these runs got the highest score? It then gives the agent's internal strategy, its policy, a little nudge, making the actions from those winning runs just a tiny bit more likely next time. That little nudge, that's the gradient part. It's a small step in the right direction. But this is exactly where my understanding hit a wall. Because if you just apply this simple rule by itself, it can lead to some really weird and totally backward results. It has this one major flaw. The lecture had this perfect example of a humanoid trying to learn to walk. In its first few tries, it's just flailing around, right? It tries falling backwards. Bam, gets a -10 reward. Bad. Then it just stands perfectly still, gets a reward of 0. Okay, not bad, but not good. But then it kind of lurches forward and falls flat on its face. But because it moved forward a little, it actually gets a small positive reward, maybe a +5. And right there, that's the core of the problem. Because that entire falling forward trajectory got a positive score, the simple reinforce rule rewards every single action that was part of that fall. The algorithm's logic is, hey, falling forward got us points. That must be the good stuff. And it starts to reinforce every part of that faceplant. The algorithm is now learning to become an expert at falling down.
So, obviously, that's not what we want. How do we fix it? Well, the lecture introduced two, frankly, brilliant upgrades that basically inject some much-needed common sense into this whole process.
First up, causality. I mean, it's just common sense, right? Whatever action you take right now can't possibly change what's already happened in the past. So instead of grading an action based on the entire journey, start to finish, we're only going to judge it based on the rewards that happen after the action is taken. This is a game changer. It means a clumsy move at the beginning isn't punished if it leads to something great later on. It's all about future consequences. Okay, but the second upgrade, this one is even more powerful. Instead of just asking, hey, was this a good outcome? We're going to ask a much smarter question. Was this outcome better than average? We figure out a baseline, which is usually just the average score from all our recent tries, and we subtract it from the score. So now we're not just looking for good, we are hunting for better. And the effect of this is huge. By using that baseline, the agent stops patting itself on the back for actions that are just kind of okay. A stumbling action that gets a +10 reward isn't seen as good anymore if the average performance is, say, +20. This is what pushes the agent to go from just stumbling forward to actually running. It stops it from getting stuck on good enough and forces it to aim for great. All right, so putting this all together, what are my big takeaways from this? What's the bottom line on policy gradients? Look, policy gradients are this amazing core concept. On the one hand, they're super intuitive. I mean, do more of what works just makes sense. And they can learn some ridiculously complex skills from scratch. But the lecture was really clear about the downsides. The learning process can be really noisy. That means its performance can swing all over the place. One try is great, the next is terrible. And to get a clear signal through all that noise, you need a ton of data, a ton of trial and error. So yeah, they're powerful, but they can also be super inefficient. So if I had to boil it all down, here's what really clicked for me. First, the goal is to learn from pure experience, not by copying someone else. The core idea is simple: reinforce what works. But, and this is the big but, that simple idea is broken on its own. It only becomes a truly powerful tool once you add those two critical upgrades: causality, so we only care about the future, and baselines, so we only reward stuff that's truly better than average. And even then, you gotta remember, this whole process can be pretty noisy and data hungry. And thinking through all of this, you naturally start to wonder, what's next? Policy gradients learn by looking back at what already happened. But what if an agent could learn to judge its own actions before it even takes them? What if it had a little critic in its head, guiding it in real time? And that very idea, well, that's what sets us up for the next level of even more advanced methods. It's where this whole learning journey is headed.